Welcome to part 7 of a series where we're going to be building a social media with React and Django. In the previous video, we built the create post page and a home page where we display all the posts in the app. But in this video, we're going to be building the search users page where users can search for other users. But just before we get started, a lot of effort goes into this series, so if you could like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because it supports me to keep making these tutorials. But with that said, let's get started. I'm back in my Visual Studio Code, and the way I want to structure this video is we're first going to create a new user serializer and our search users API. Then we're going to move on to building our front end for our search users page. Then we're going to finally edit our navbar as our profile link is hard coded at the moment and we want to change this. So the first thing we need to do is head into our serializers.py file in our Django app so we can build this new user serializer. So if we go into backend, then base, then serializers.py. You can see we've got these two other user serializers, but we need a new one as we're going to be passing in certain information about a user when we search them, as we have this page here, which is showing a list of users' profiles, and it's going to have their first name, last name, and their username and profile picture. So we'll create a serializer now. It's going to be pretty basic. It's just going to pass this information. So we'll do class user serializer. Serializers.model serializer. Then, like always, we need to have a class meta, and in here we're going to call the model, so my user. Then the fields we're going to pass through. So like I said, we're going to pass through our username, the profile image, then the first name and last name of the user. Okay. So we've created that serializer. Now we want to create the API to search for users. So we go to views.py. I'm just going to scroll. Oh, first we need to import our new serializer. And we'll scroll to the bottom. And we'll create our new API. Okay. So as we're getting a list of users, it's going to be a GET request. And we also want to be authenticated to call this API. So permission classes and pass through is authenticated. Then we'll call it search users, which will pass in a request, and now we can start building out this API. Okay, so the way this is going to work is we want to pass our search into this API, so what we're searching for, and then it's going to give us an array of users that are related to this search. Okay, and this search is going to be based on the user's username. So if I search for MattMakesCode, it's going to give me the user MattMakesCode, or if I search in M or MAT, it's going to give me MattMakesCode. Okay, so it's based on the letters. But our problem is, as it's a GET request, we can't actually pass in data through a body like we have, for example, with this post request, where we have request.data. We can't do that as it's a GET request. So the way we're going to do this is using something called query parameters, just like this, where we pass in a query in our URL. So we'll do that, and then we'll grab this query. So the way we're going to do that is we can use a Django function called query params, and it's basically going to search for this query in our URL. Okay, and we want to get this. We're looking for the word query, and this is going to get what's after our query. Okay, after this equals here. And then we also need to state what happens if we don't pass anything after this query, and so we'll just give a default of an empty string. Okay, so we've got our search here in our query. Now we want to filter out our users array of all of our users based on this query, and it's going to be based on the user's username. So we can do that doing this. So we want to grab my user dot objects dot filter. Then we're going to do username, as that's what we're filtering by, __ I contains. Okay, this is going to allow us to filter by search, right? So we have our array of users. Now, like always, we need to pass it through our serializer, which is our new user serializer, and then pass in users, and then state many is true, as it's going to be an array. Then we'll just return this serializer. Okay. So this is our API. Now we need to make a route for it in our urls.py file. So we'll just import our new search users API and then create a route for it. Just like that. I'm just going to call it search. Okay. So that's our new API, and we can actually call it from here. So first, we just want to log in. And then we'll call our new API, but we need to add this query at the end, okay? So we do it like this, with the question mark, then query, and we'll do equals, say, Matt. And you can see we get all the users related with Matt, and we only have 2 users in our database at the moment, but it's returning us MattMakesCode. And you can see here, if I do Jo, we get Joe Doe, okay? So that's how it's going to work, and the API is working now. So the next thing we want to do is actually go to our front end so we can start building out our page. So if I go back into my VS Code, we're going to open up our front end, and then first thing, like always, we need to create our endpoint that's going to call this API, alright? So create our new endpoint, call it search users. We'll take in a search, which we'll grab from our search users page. Then we want to create a response, which is going to be calling our API. So we have search here. We want that there as well. And then, like we did just here, where we have the question mark query equals, we want to add that here. So question mark query equals, and this is going to be equal to our search. So we'll just plug in our search, which we're passing through, just like that. And that should return our list of users. So we'll just return the data, okay? So that's our API. Now we can start building out our new route. So we go to routes, make a new file called search.js, and we'll create a new component. Just do something like this. Then we want to call this from our routes, so we have a new page for it. So just copy and paste this, import our new search route. So instead of home, it's going to be search. And then we'll put it at search here. Okay. So when I go to my front end, and instead of MattMakesCode, we do search. See, we got search here and it's registering the page. Now next thing I want to do is add it to our navbar here, so we're gonna have to get a new icon. So I'll just type in search and choose this one here. Go to our navbar, and then create a new link. So we'll just do search. I'm just going to go to search. So now when I go to my front end, we got this extra link here, and so I go to home, then I go back to search, we go back to the search page. Okay, so now I actually want to build out this search form, which just looks like this. So we have our input, our heading, and then a list of our users, okay? And when we click on one of these users, it's going to take us to that profile page. So we can start building that out now. So if I just close these. Like always, we're going to surround it in a flex. And I'll just import all of these from another file, so they're going to be similar. Probably not, just update them as we go. So as you can see here, I'll just show my image of what we're building on the right here. So we want our flex so we can center our components. Then we want a vertical stack, so we got our heading, then we got our input, and then we got our stack of different profiles. Okay, so we got our virtual stack, then we want our heading, then we want our input, so this is going to have to be a horizontal stack, as our button and input are going to be next to each other horizontally, so we'll just import this. And then we want our vertical stack of all our different profiles. Okay, so this is the structure of it. If I just give it a heading, call it search users, and then we have an input here and a button, which is going to be search, and then this is going to be our users. Okay, so you can see it's like this, and now we want to center all of this. So make it the whole width, and then justify content center. We also want a bit of padding at the top, so it's not right on that navbar. So we'll just give padding top 50 pixels. Then we also want our whole thing, so all our profiles will be about 500 pixels wide maximum, and if we shrink the screen, they'll be about 95% of the screen. Okay, so we'll say width 95%, and then the maximum width of 500 pixels. Okay, and then we also want our heading to be at the start. As you can see here, it's not centered, so we'll just align items start. Then we also need a gap between everything. There you go. So that's looking better there. Now we also want to make this 100%, so if it's the parent container, so you can see that's stretched out now, as it's 500 pixels, just like its parent. And then we have to do the same for our vertical stack here. Okay, that needs to be 100%. Then we'll also make sure there's no gap between our button and our input. So that's looking pretty good. I'm just gonna make some edits to our input to style this. So we'll just make background white, and then we'll make this color scheme, make it blue. That looks a lot better. Okay. So we've got all the styling done so far. Now we actually need to get a list of our users on a search. So we'll type, say, Matt in here, click search, and then it will show us a list of users related to a Matt. Okay. So what we need is to grab what we search in our input field. So we'll create a state for this. Be empty by default, just need to import use state. Then we also need a state for the list of users. So set users equals use state. Okay. By default, that's going to be an empty array. So now what we want to do is also have a button which calls our API, and we'll set our users to what's returned. Okay, so we'll handle the search. It's going to be an asynchronous function as we're calling our API. And we'll do const users equals await search users. So let's just go to our endpoints and import this. Then we'll have search users, and then pass in our search from our input. Okay. Now we can set our users array to what's returned. So now we actually need to handle this search. So when we input into our input field, it should set whatever's in our input field to this search value here. So we'll do on change, do E, and then set the search to whatever in this input field. We can do that by target.value. Okay. So every time we type in this input field, it's going to set this search value to whatever's in the input field from this value here. So now we've set it, what we want to do is when we click the button, it's going to handle our search. But at the moment, we're actually not displaying the users, so we won't be able to see. So we can actually just quickly create a map to show everything that's displayed. Just like this. Just make that user. Then return, I don't know, some text, or just say heading, as it's imported already. And we'll just say user.username. And hopefully all the users related to our search, it will show their usernames in a list. So we just do Matt, and you can see we get MattMakesCode. If I do Jo, it gives me Jodo. So that's working perfectly. Next thing I want to do is build this component here, as you'll see on my screen, of the user profile. So we'll build that out in a new component, and it's going to return that for each user. And when we click on this, it's going to take us to their user profile. Okay, so we'll create a new component called user profile. And they're going to return, like always, we'll have a wrapper for a flex. Then inside this flex, we want a H stack, as we're going to have our profile image on the left and then our text on the right. And then in here, we're going to have our image for our user profile. And then on the right here, we're going to have our name and username stacked on top of each other. Okay, so we'll have some text, and this is going to be a first name, last name, this is going to be a username. So we actually want to just pass all this detail through. So we're going to pass in a username, profile image, first name, the last name. We also need to pass that through here as well. So we just call our user profile. We have our username, which can be equal to user.username, and then so on and so on with all the others. So user.profile image, then first name, user.first name, last name, user.last name. Okay, so let's pass everything through. We can actually just quickly show we're getting the username, and sorry, that should go underneath. Show that we're getting everything. Just import box and image. You can see we're getting the first name, last name here, and the username, and then we're just going to sort out our profile image. Okay, so this profile image, we're going to have to import our server URL, which we made in another video. It's basically just our server's URL, which is hosted on 127.8.1000, then /API. So basically our Python backend. So, and then we can put our profile image URL after that, and it's going to grab our profile image. So we can do that like this. We'll do our server URL, and then we're going to have our profile image here. You'll see it's going to load our profile image, but now we need to style it so it's smaller and in a profile image, like a circle profile image. So we can do that now. So we want the size to be about 70 pixels. Then we want to have a full border radius, so it's a circle. We also want to hide anything that goes outside the circle, as some images will be obviously rectangular and they're not naturally circle. So we'll make overflow hidden anything that goes beyond this circle will just be hidden. And then if we have a transparent image, we'll just make the background white. And then we also need to create that border, okay? So 1 pixel solid. Now for our image, we need to make our box size cover the parent. So we'll do box size 100%, and then we'll say object fit to cover, okay? You can see here, we have this profile image here now. So it looks pretty good. Now, next thing I want to do is actually style this this profile, like user profile button kind of, or block, as you'll say. So what we can do is make the width 100%. So you can see it covers the parent. Then we also want to say the height's going to be 100 pixels. We also want a border, so 1 pixel solid, and a border color, we'll say a light gray, so gray.300. So we've got that border here. Then we want a border radius, about 8 pixels, and then we'll make the background white, okay? So that looks pretty good. Then we'll just make sure everything's centered using justify content center. Align items center, okay? So now we've got this H stack, and we want everything to be at the edge here, but we don't want it touching the side. We want a bit of padding, so we can just make the width 90% of the parent. So you can see we're just here now. Then we also want a gap between our image and our text. So you can see we get that gap there now. And then we just want to make sure we're aligning everything in the center. Okay. We've already styled our image and our box. Next thing we need to do is make sure these are just always at the start here. I know they're not now, but sometimes they might shift. So we'll just make sure we have align items start, and then also create a smaller gap between these two. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now I just want to edit the text, so we're going to make our name a bit bolder. So you can see here, it's a bit bolder here. And then we're actually going to make the username a lighter color, so give it a light gray. We'll also make it a bit smaller, so we'll say 15 pixels. And we also want to add this at here to know it's our username. Okay, so it just looks a bit like that now. So I'm pretty happy how that looks. What we want to do is actually make it so when we click this profile, it will take us to their profile. Okay, so we want to create a use navigate. Just gonna have to import this at the top here. Okay, from React Root DOM, and then create handle navigate. So we'll nav to the user, just like this. So the username. Then we click on this block, handle nav, handle navigate. Obviously import it from the wrong section. Where have we imported it from? Sorry about this. Just go to our Navbar. There you go. And now it takes us to their profile. We can look at Matt. Obviously I don't have a first name or last name here. I didn't set it in my database, but if I click on it, it takes us to our profile. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually sort out this user button here, because as you can see when I go to my navbar, it's actually just hard coded in as MattMakesCode, but instead we want to get the username of the person logged in as every user is not going to be called MattMakesCode. So we want to grab the username, and we want to basically call that username when we click the button. So the way we do this is actually go to our auth login in our context, and when we log in, we want to store our username in our local storage. So local storage is just a simple way of storing data on our browser, and the way we can do this is local storage dot set item. Then we have to create a key so we can get this local storage. So we'll call it user data. Then we have to JSON.stringify, as it has to be saved as a string. And then we're gonna create an object with a username key and the username we're using to log in. So this will only happen if we have a successful login, and then I can also show you where this local storage is stored in our browser. So you can see we have our account here. We just need to log out. So if we go to inspect and get rid of our cookies, and I refresh, you see we're logged out. Now, if I go to local storage, you can see I've tested this before. If I just get rid of that, refresh, and then when I log in to MattMakesCode, you can see we get this local storage user data saved with our username, okay? And this is going to be permanent until we log in again. And say we log in with another user, it's just going to replace this user data with that username, okay? So what we want to do now is grab that local storage. So we need to go back to our navbar, and what we want to do is create a new function. So we'll do handle navigate user, and now we need to grab our username from our storage. So we can do this from local storage dot get item. We're gonna get user data. We also have to turn this into JSON as it's stored in a string, as we stringified it. So we'll do JSON dot parse. So this is going to turn our string JSON into actual JSON, and that way we can access our username, okay? So now we've got a username, we can just nav to this username. Just like this. And then instead of calling that, we're just going to do handle navigate user, just like this, okay? So now when I refresh, you can see, just double check, we've got our user data here with our username. If I go to another page, then go back to my page, it took us to create post MattMakesCode. So what we need to actually do is just add that slash there. So make sure you do that. So now we go back to our account, okay? So that's working perfectly, but there's also just one more error, which is going to be a super quick fix. When we go to search and I select Joe and then go to their profile, if I click on the home page, it's not actually going to change, but you can see it did change in the URL here. And that's just because we need to reload the page, because this uses the same template. Because if I just refresh the page here, we do get our MattMakesCode. So all we're going to do in here, we want to reload the web page when we click this user link, okay? And this is basically going to load our user page instead of the one we're already at, as it's refreshing all of the data it's getting. So we just do window.location.reload, and you can see now when we're here and I click the home button, we go to our home page. So just to test everything out, we can search for users, just go to Joe and unfollow him, follow him, and then go back to my home page. I can do this from anywhere, okay? So that's the end of the video. We're basically right at the end now. We've got one more video where we're going to be building a settings page where a user can change their bio, their profile picture, their name, and all of that. So thanks for staying along for the series. I hope you've learned a lot, and if it's requested enough, I can also make a video where we deploy the app as well. So I'll see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.